Our square is finished as far as all of the squares. So our 4x4 square is done. We're pretending this is a blanket. This is our little baby blanket. So now how are we going to finish this off? Well, I think it will be pretty cool to have it be long across here, across the top edge, just all straight knit all the way across the top edge. Have a mitered corner, have that mitered corner still going out, and then come back down this straight, this left side straight. So that's the way we're going to finish this one off. There's all kinds of different ways you could finish yours off. You could do partials, you could do, you know, to here and then have a seam, so you go back and forth and then seam those together or knit those two together. For the purposes of this, and probably for the purposes of my big blanket, I'm planning on just doing a big long thing. Yes, I know those will be some long edges, but I'm okay with that. Alright, so let's get going. I'm going to start and just pick up and go across, and I will talk to you again when we get right here. So I'm going to start in this square, start in this corner, pick up my stitches across, pick up 16 between each section, and then I'm going to do something special when I get to this top left corner, or top left corner. I've got 16 stitches here. I may look at that a little bit. I'm not completely happy with how that one got picked up, so I may bring my needle all the way to the other end and futz with that. But just do it so that you're happy with it. Pick it up in a way that you're happy with. Have 16 stitches. I may put a 17th right there just to pull it up. We'll see. 16 in between here. Now I've got my stitches on my stitch holder. Because of how I put the stitches on the stitch holder, my stitches are coming off right over there. So I'm going to pull this needle forward, and then I'm going to slip these stitches onto my left needle. Then I will just knit them across and then go ahead and pick up these stitches here, and I will meet you back when I'm at that corner. Well, let's just slip these 16 and then we'll knit them. Alright, so I have all of these stitches slipped to my left needle. I have been taking the stitch markers that were in these stitches out and lifting them up and putting them on the right needle. So now I'm going to knit across these 16 stitches, and I almost forgot, this is my first end weave in. So this is my end for my pickup stitches, so I'm going to weave this in on my next right side row, but I'll weave this in now as I work these 16 stitches. When I'm done working these 16 stitches, just knitting them, I will take this stitch marker, put it on my right needle, because this stitch will be on my right needle, and then go ahead and pick up these stitches. Then I'm going to do something different right on this corner. We'll talk about that when I get to it. Here I am. I've done 16 stitches here and just knitted those, and you can see now as I have knitted them how nicely that's going to transition. It's just going to smoothly, very smoothly transition between these two colors, between this color and the gray, as easily as it did between the gray and this color here. And it's just going to be extremely smooth and pretty. Then I've picked up 14 stitches, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. I'm going to do the 15th stitch. Then I'm going to put a stitch marker in place. Now, I'm going to take this center stitch right here. So I'm going to take this center stitch right here, and I'm going to knit into the front, into the back, and into the front. And that looks really, really weird. But that's what we're going to do. I'm going to take this stitch marker out because it gets in the way a little bit, and I'm going to put another stitch marker right on the other side of that. Now I have this end to weave in here from this, so I'll weave that in as I keep going along. Where do I go now? Do I go into here? Do I go into this spot? So what I did was I counted up 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15. Alrighty, so that's my 15th right there. So that's where I'm going to go in and pick up my stitches along this side. Now, you notice that I'm turning a corner, and this is, okay, and it's getting a little pulley there. So what I'm going to do is actually do a magic loop trick. So I'm going to pull my needle all the way out, and then I'm going to start picking up the rest of these stitches. So I already have one because I'm counting to the left side of this, or to the left side of the stitch marker. So I already have one. Two. I'm going to pull, remember to weave my ends in. 3. This may be a little bit fiddlier than we're used to picking up stitches, but it's worth it. Okay, so that end is woven in right there. I'm going to keep going, picking up these stitches. I'm going to pause for a second in the process of picking up. Again, as I'm picking up, I'm going to take this stitch marker and put it onto my right needle, and then I'm going to come to here. I'm going to take this stitch marker, put it on my right needle, but I also need to, again, slip, because this is again in the wrong orientation, slip all of these stitches onto my left needle or onto another needle, and then knit them off, whatever you prefer. Alright, so I'm going to do all of that. You've seen how they slip when we did it up here. So I'll do all of this, pick up all of these stitches, and I'll meet you back right here. Alright, we've got all these cast on, or picked up, I mean. We've got all these picked up. I went back in this stitch, and I'm a little happier with where that's going to turn out. We've got our knit front and knit back in that corner stitch. We've got all of these side stitches picked up, all of our stitch markers in place, and I don't really need these, but doesn't hurt. So, a couple of things. For this stitch marker was in the stitch. If you have a stitch marker in a stitch, knit the stitch or pick up the stitch, then take out the stitch marker. Just because it's a real pain if you take it out and you miss that stitch for some reason and it slips away from you. Then you have to dig for it to find it and do some repairs. And it's through a double decrease, so you knit it first, then take the stitch marker out, so that way it's secured. Now, why did we do this and what are we doing here? Let's talk about that. And once I'm done picking up, I can do that with my needle. I can just pull it through, so now all of these stitches are just in one continuous thing. Now what I want is for this to come to a point. In order to do that, and I also want to keep as much as I can kind of this decrease line going up through the corner. So I need to do a decrease here, but in order to, if I decreased without extra stitches, to decrease 2, because these work because you're decreasing the stitches, I have to actually put in stitches. So I'm going to be knitting back across the back, just knitting all of these stitches like I've done before. Then as I come back across here, as I'm knitting the front side, I'm going to get to these stitches, and this stitch right before the stitch marker, I'm going to knit front and back. Then I'm going to decrease these 3. Then I'm going to knit front and back. And then keep knitting. And then knit all the way back again. I will pause when I get to these points right here so that you can see and exactly what I'm talking about, and I'll walk you through exactly what's going on with these stitches here. And just so you can see, all of the ends are woven in. As I was doing this, all of these ends are woven in. So the only end, and this end's going to be woven in. So when I get to the end of this border, I am going to have one end that I need to weave in. That's it. Which is exciting. All right. So I'm going to work across the back, knitting all of the stitches. Then I'm going to turn around and knit to about right here, on the front side, and then I will check back in with you and we'll talk about how we're going to work this corner to make it a corner, to make it a continue that mitered corner look. All right, so I've stopped 3 stitches before my marker. I'm going to knit these 2, then in this one I'm going to knit front and back. So I'll lift that up and show you again. So I go into the front of the stitch, and then I knit into the back of the stitch. While this is still on the needle, I don't slip this off. And I've just increased. Now, I slip my stitch, then I work my center double decrease, so I continue on that look of that mitered square. Then I slip my stitch marker, knit into the front and into the back of that stitch, slip it off. Now all of the rest of this is just knitting. So I'm going to knit all the way down Then I'm going to knit all the way across the back, and before I see you again, then I will knit. So finish this row, turn around, knit all of these stitches, then come back and I'll join you again about right here. So we can work the next right side row and let you know how to do that, because now our stitch markers, it'll be a little bit different because our stitch markers are just on either side of this center stitch instead of having 3 stitches. So see you in there. Here we are back at our center again. I have knit to 2 stitches before this stitch marker. So I'm going to knit into the front and back of this stitch. I'm going to slip this stitch, drop the stitch marker, put it back, slip as if to purl, slip as if I'm knitting 2 together, drop that stitch marker, knit, pass that slip stitch over, and as you can see, I'm getting that mitered look again. And now I'm going to knit into the front and back of the very next stitch. All right, then I'm going to knit all the way down here, and then it'll be time to start binding off. All right, so I finished. I've got all of that done. Now, as we look at this, we can see we've got 1, 2 ridges here. We've got 3 ridges on each of these. What will happen is, as I do the bind off, that will put the third row right there. Which bind off to use? You can do the one that you like best, that looks best. For the purposes of this, I'm going to do the simple lace. I'm going to do the simple lace bind off because I like how that looks, and because it matches, I think, pretty closely to the front look of the cast on. Okay, so I'm going to use just a basic lace bind off. To do that, you knit 2 together through the back loop. You put that stitch back on your left needle, knit 2 together through the back loop, put the stitch back on the needle, knit 2 together through the back loop. Now I do want to try to do this loosely. And I'm just going to work this bind off all the way along. Let's see if we can see what this looks like on the front. So you can see it's a fairly stretchy bind off. A fairly stretchy bind off. That's about the same stretchy as my cable cast on, and that produces this nice edge right here and does the 1, 2, and then that's our 3rd row. It's a little close, but that's okay because this one's pretty close too. All right, so I'm just going to keep binding off, and I'll meet you when I'm done binding off. And we're done with this here in the middle, so I'm just going to keep working my bind off all the way around that corner. And I'll meet you when I'm done. All right, so we're done. The entire square is done. We've got this long, and it looks a little wonky, but that will, after you wash it, if you had this in a whole big blanket, you wouldn't even notice it. Wouldn't even matter. In this smaller square, all you need to do is wash and block it, and all of that will take care of itself. If you would like that to be a more pronounced point, all you'd have to do when you block it is just stick, let's see if I can, that one's not quite long enough. Let's see, we'll use the needle. So if you wanted this a little more pronounced, just when you block it, just pin it. Then it'll dry with that nice point on it. This edge is going to be fixed up and cleaned up just a little bit when I weave this end in. All right, there are other ways you could do it. There are other ways that you could do the border. You could just do a strip to here that was square, and then pick up all along here and just do a strip that was square. You could do partial strips and then graft those together, then just seam them together a little bit. Take a little bit of a needle and go down. If you wanted to do it in pieces, experiment, figure out what you like and what works best for you. And an entire blanket with this, going all the way up an entire blanket with this, maybe not. But another idea, just do smaller squares and then just seam those squares together. And then you could have them be themed with a different color scheme, and you could have a different color in the middle. There are so many choices and so many possibilities once you have learned this technique and once you have learned to do it. So I hope you like this square. You could use this now for a pillow front or a square in a larger blanket. This could be a part of kind of a patchwork blanket. It's kind of patchworky. It would work with other squares, other blanket squares, other different types of knitted squares. You could put it in because it's nicely framed. There's all kinds of things that you can do with this. Just this piece right here. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it has been valuable to you, and I look forward to seeing you with future tutorials. I hope you found value in this tutorial. If you have, please consider a one-time payment via PayPal or a regular subscription via Patreon. The links are down below and they are on the screen. Again, thank you for joining me. See you next time.